Reasons why the God of the Bible looks fake according to his deeds in the Bible. I know this topic will hurt many religious people, but it's important to approach discussions about religious beliefs with sensitivity, as these topics are deeply personal to many people. That said, I can outline some common criticisms or arguments that people use to question the portrayal of God in the Bible from a skeptical perspective. Number 1. Problems of evil. The existence of widespread suffering and evil in the world is often cited as inconsistent with the idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God. Critics argue that if God were truly benevolent and omnipotent, he would prevent evil and suffering. But why is he silent? Number 2. Contradictory actions. Some argue that God's actions in the Bible appear inconsistent or contradictory. For example, God is portrayed as loving and merciful, yet there are stories where he orders the destruction of entire cities, e.g., Sodom and Gomorrah, or the killing of innocent people, e.g., the Egyptian firstborn in the Exodus story, or most loving small tribe, e.g., Israel. Number 3. Problem of free will. The concept of free will is often used to explain the presence of evil, but skeptics argue that if God is omniscient, all-knowing, he would know the choices people will make before they make them, effectively limiting the genuineness of free will. But in reality, will he know? Number 4. Biblical atrocities. There are several instances in the Bible where God either commands or condones actions that, by today's moral standards, would be considered atrocities. These include wars, slavery, and the treatment of women and children. Critics argue that a truly benevolent God would not endorse such actions. Number 5. Historical and scientific inaccuracies. Some skeptics point out that certain events described in the Bible do not align with historical or scientific evidence. For example, the global flood in the story of Noah's Ark lacks geological evidence, and the creation narrative conflicts with the scientific understanding of the origins of the universe and life on Earth. Number 6. Changing nature of God. Critics argue that the portrayal of God seems to change between the Old Testament and the New Testament, moving from a more vengeful, wrathful figure to a more loving and forgiving one. This change is seen by some as evidence that the concept of God evolved over time as human society and moral understanding evolved. Number 7. Miracles and supernatural claims. The miracles described in the Bible are often viewed with skepticism. Critics argue that these events lack credible evidence and resemble mythological stories from other ancient cultures, casting doubt on their authenticity. Number 8. Inconsistencies and contradictions. The Bible contains numerous passages that seem to contradict each other, both within the same book and between different books. Skeptics argue that if the Bible were truly divinely inspired, it would not have these inconsistencies. Number 9. Human origins of Scripture. The Bible was written by multiple authors over many centuries, and some skeptics argue that it reflects the cultural, historical, and moral context of the times in which it was written, rather than the dictates of a divine being. The various translations and interpretations over time also raise questions about its divine authority. Number 10. Selective intervention. God is depicted as intervening in human affairs in some biblical stories, but remains silent or inactive during other times of suffering, such as genocides or natural disasters in history. This selective intervention raises questions about the consistency of a benevolent deity. Number 11. Moral paradoxes. God's commands sometimes seem to conflict with modern moral principles. For example, the endorsement of practices like slavery or the death penalty for seemingly minor offenses, e.g., working on the Sabbath, contrasts with the idea of a morally perfect being. Number 12. Anthropomorphic depiction. The portrayal of God in the Bible often includes human-like emotions such as anger, jealousy, and regret. Critics argue that an all-powerful, omniscient being would not exhibit these traits, suggesting that these depictions might be human projections rather than divine characteristics. Number 13. Inconsistent justice. The Bible contains stories where God punishes entire groups of people for the sins of a few, e.g., the flood during Noah's time, or the destruction of entire cities. This collective punishment is seen as inconsistent with the idea of a just and fair deity. Number 14. Hiddenness of God. The argument of divine hiddenness suggests that if God truly existed and desired a relationship with humanity, he would make his presence more evident. The lack of clear, undeniable evidence of God's existence leads some to doubt the biblical portrayal. Number 15. Religious pluralism. The Bible claims exclusivity in its depiction of God, yet countless religions throughout history have described different deities with similar levels of conviction. Critics argue that the existence of many gods in human history diminishes the claim that the biblical God is the one true God. Number 16. Use of fear and threats. The Bible frequently uses fear, particularly the threat of eternal damnation in hell, to enforce belief and obedience. Some argue that a truly loving and just God would not use fear tactics, which resemble more human methods of control. Number 17. Conditional love. While God is described as loving, his love in the Bible often appears conditional, based on obedience and belief. The idea of conditional love contrasts with the concept of a truly omnibenevolent deity, who would presumably love all people unconditionally. Number 18. Questionable prophecies. Some prophecies in the Bible are seen as either vague, unfulfilled, or subject to interpretation. Skeptics argue that if God were truly omniscient, prophecies would be clear, specific, and consistently accurate. Number 19. God's favoritism. The Bible often depicts God as favoring certain individuals or groups, e.g., the Israelites, over others. This favoritism is viewed as inconsistent with the idea of an impartial and universally loving deity. These points reflect common arguments made by those who are skeptical of the divine nature of the Bible or the existence of God as described in it. However, these are just one side of the debate, and many believers have counter-arguments or interpretations that address these concerns. In case you feel like hurted by these reasons, I'm so sorry, but we must learn. You can subscribe to my channel, or if you have any argument, let me see and discuss on comment section. Be blessed.